Welcome to this talk on surviving a design review. You've all been there. You've worked hard. You've solved the tough design problems. Now you're going to get feedback from your client. You're going to a design review. Welcome to hell. We've all been there. And the truth is, it doesn't have to be that way. Well, it does have to be that way, but not every design review is terrible. Sometimes, when we're working with our colleagues, we take a design, an early design that we've come up with, we sit around the table, we bat it around, we blitz, as a speaker talked about earlier today, and we come up with something that's a lot more refined and a whole lot better. And sometimes, we sit down with our clients and we come up with something that's a whole lot worse. Why does it happen? And more importantly, what can we do about it? Let me start with the bad news. We can't always do something about it. That's something I have learned with 30 years of beating my head against the wall for design reviews. But there are a number of reasons that it happens. I think the first one is they don't get design. They don't grok it. They don't understand the difference between design and business. Now, in business, your job usually is to make the best decision you can and compromise, compromise, compromise. As a speaker said this morning, compromise leads to crappy design all the time. But that's not the way businesses operate. Secondly, each person who's sitting around that table is focused on their personal individual needs, their silos. They don't generally care a whole lot about the big picture. They don't generally worry about the integrity of the design as we do. The third problem is that they don't have the vocabulary, and because they don't have the understanding, there's a tendency for them to talk about the issues they see in terms of solutions. For example, a few years ago, quite a few years ago actually, I was working on a project for the National Football League. And somebody came to me and said, I hate green. It's a football field. What color should I make the grass? He did not have an answer for that. So they will come at you with solutions. The fonts are too small. You have to move this tab over there. And those are solutions that will destroy the integrity of our designs. So we need to find a way to get around that if we can. Now, in Victorian era, they used to talk about bestiaries. I think that was the Victorian word for a zoo. And here is my bestiary of some of the most interesting and toxic people that I have sat across the table for in these many years that I've done design. The Decider, Mr. Nice, the Enforcer, Sir Know-It-All, my favorite, Ms. Clueless, and the silent killer who usually comes from the IT department. I'd like to maybe run through these a bit with you folks and give you a sense. These are not the only toxic personalities that you're likely to encounter, and I'm sure many of you will have suggestions of others that I could have added. But they do seem to show up at a lot of companies. I think what happens is they leave one, they get a job, they go to another one. They're just better at making my life miserable. Now, the decider does not have to be a woman. It can be a man. Usually this person is the boss, because the very characteristics that make her a toxic individual are the same characteristics that cause you to rise in the ranks of corporate life. You speak firmly, you're definitive, you keep things moving, you step on people who are in your way, and you go up and you go up. But in the design review, they are extremely toxic and extremely dangerous. Her philosophy, we need to keep moving forward. Why are we spending all this time talking about this stuff? Who cares whether it's tabs or a side menu or a top menu or a bottom menu? I'm just going to make a decision. We'll do it that way. Bit by bit, we end up with the horse with wheels, because she does not understand that the small decisions that she's making, that she thinks is pushing the design forward, are really destroying its conceptual integrity. Now, what is her greatest fear? I think her greatest fear is that she'll look bad. And therefore, she's worried that she'll look bad because the project will not be done on time, it will not be out there. She really just wants this thing out there and working. She's a bully. And one of the problems is if she's in the design meeting, because she is the boss, everybody will keep their mouth shut. Nobody wants to cross her. Nobody wants that confrontation. So they just agree with whatever she says. It's the safest thing to do. So what do you do about somebody like this? Well, if possible, keep her out of the meeting. Try not to let her be there, because if she's in the meeting, she will dominate the meeting, and that's not going to work for anybody. Tell her that you will review the situation with her later and communicate if that's at all possible. You can't always do that, and you cannot always deal with these people when they are in the meeting. Often, they end up being toxic folks, and that's just the way it is. Usually sitting next to the decider is Mr. Nice Guy. Mr. Nice Guy hates confrontation. He doesn't understand why we can't just all get along. The problem is that you can't trust anything he says, because 30 seconds he's going to have a different opinion. Why? Because he always agrees with what the decider says, and if the decider isn't there, he always agrees with the last person who spoke. You know, there's an old joke about somebody who said, the two guys are arguing, and the third guy comes along and he says to the first one, he says, "You're right." And the second guy says, "How can he be right?" "I'm right." He says, "Yes, you're right too." Well, that's the decider. Everybody's right. The greatest fear the decider has is confrontation and yelling. I'm sorry? Oh, no, not yet. Did I say the decider? I meant Mr. Nice Guy. He sees that he's a peacemaker. He thinks that what he's doing is putting oil on troubled waters. He's helping everything get along. He loves reviews because he's in his element. This is the best place for him to be. So how do you handle this guy? The best way to handle this guy, if you can, is to realize that his position is always going to change. Don't argue with him. He doesn't like argument. It sends him into a total panic. Appreciate that he really is a good soul. I mean, unlike the first person, the decider, who I would say is not a good soul, usually this fellow's intentions are very good. But resist the reviews, be very calm, and just soothe, I understand, and we will get this done, and don't be worried. The enforcer is really into paperwork. She really loves reports, schedule. I once had an enforcer who wanted me to give her a project plan down to the minute. What she wanted to know was, for every day of the project, how many things would we be doing each day, and how long would they take going out 4 to 6 weeks? That job lasted about a day. She always wants approvals. Lots and lots of approvals. Well, has this person seen it? Has that person seen it? What do they have to say about that? She sees that what she's doing is managing a chaotic situation. She's bringing risk down. What do we do for her? Well, if at all possible, start by setting the agenda yourself. You schedule the reviews. You go to her and say, let's talk about what reviews we need, and make sure you're doing it on your time and on your schedule. And suppress your inner rebel. Probably had I done that, I would not have been fired off that particular job. I think it was the only time I got fired off a job. I just absolutely refused to give her to the minute a project plan. I might have even said something like bullshit or something that didn't go well in this particular financial services environment in which I was working. Sir Know-It-All. He knows more than you do. He knows more than I do. He knows more than everybody does. And he's not afraid to tell us. He's motivated by fear that he's going to look dumb and he's going to lose respect. He always has an opinion. His opinion is always the right one. And when he can, he will cite external sources, usually incorrectly, to let you know that he read a research paper or he heard some great luminary. Jacob Nielsen says you shouldn't use Flash, therefore we shouldn't use Flash. Anybody here ever heard that? How do you deal with this guy? Well, the first thing you have to do is suck up to him. You got to praise his competence. Gee, I'm really glad that you're aware of the problems there are with Flash. And it's such a good thing that Jacob took the time to tell everybody that, you know, these problems exist. And if we do this, you know that we're going to do it very carefully so that we don't run into the problems that you were smart enough to make us aware of could happen. Thank you. It hurts, but you got to do it. When you can't agree with him, you better make sure you have your facts. Don't walk into a review unprepared. Be ready to cite research, and never do it in a confrontational way, because you can win, but you'll make him an enemy for life. If you embarrass him in front of this group, that will be the end of any positive relationship that could exist. What I like to do with these guys is start by agreeing with them. And then I slowly move them into the direction. This is something I have learned from, no offense, my wife. Sorry, Anne. But the basic concept is here. You don't say, go over here. You say, yes, we're going to go over here. And then you take them there very gently, and he'll never even realize you changed direction. Clueless. She's usually the marketing director. She doesn't get this technology. Now, you know, usually this person, not always, is not a toxic person. Often this person has a very, very good soul, but is enormously intuitive. Does her job or does his job based on gut feel, not on technology. You put this person into an electronic, technical, interactive situation, and they are clearly a fish out of water. And as a result, she's likely not to understand the critical issues. She will tend to over-respect and honor people that she thinks are innovators and thought leaders. Now, I've used that to advantage from time to time. There are a smattering of these people out there that think I'm really great. And that's terrific. But it really is an exaggeration of the truth. And so she'll come back and tell you, wow, I saw this consultant, and he has this wonderful thing, and here's the methodology, and we're going to use this methodology. Oh, my God. You can deal with these people, but you have to be very, very gentle. You have to start by talking her language, not your language. You have to become a bridge between the work that she does and the technical side that she's desperately uncomfortable with. And don't underestimate, very, very easy to underestimate these clueless people because they're clueless. But they're not clueless about everything. When I first started, this had to be 25 years ago, and I went to a consulting company, and there was one of these people here, and we were actually asked to do a project. It was a very exciting project. We were doing something for Bill Gates at Microsoft, when Microsoft was really Microsoft. And I walked into the room, and I sat down at the table with all of these people, and I looked this person in the eye, and I said, so what is this project about? And he said, excitement. And he looked at me. So when are we going to have it, Charlie? I had no idea what he was talking about, not a clue. Actually, that one didn't go too well either. Finally, my favorite toxic person, the silent killer. He works for IT. He's very, very smart and doesn't tend to think very much of any of us. And what he's really worried about is that we're going to force him to do stuff he thinks is just not worth doing. Now, how are we going to deal with him? Well, you have to understand, first of all, that he has a very different point of view from everybody else. The first thing is that in business, he respects knowledge, not authority. He doesn't care that the vice president or the president or the CEO said to do something. Well, that guy's an idiot. What does he know? But the guy next door, now he really understands .NET. He's somebody I can listen to. So he will respect competence. Secondly, he tends to be loyal to his technology. I'm a PHP programmer, not I work for Citibank. When you ask him what his career is like, he'll give you the list of the technology that he's worked with, not the list of organizations that he's worked with. And if there's something he doesn't appreciate, he discounts it. I was at a developers conference just a few days ago, and they were going through a really interesting Microsoft presentation of some new technology, and the guy kept going, oh, that's marketing. Went past that, oh, that's a marketing slide. Never got to see him. They were great slides. They were talking about the positioning, the audience, all sorts of things that I, as a designer, was really interested in. But as far as this guy was concerned, it wasn't technical and it wasn't worth doing. So how do we handle him? Well, our best bet is to start by acknowledging that geek work is different. Understand the kind of work that he does is very precise, it is very difficult, it is very persnickety, it requires a great amount of time, dedication, and Fritos, and Jolt Cola, and Red Bull in order to get it where it needs to be. So start off by understanding that. Don't ever, ever, ever flip the bozo. You know the bozo switch? The bozo switch is an imaginary switch that lives in the minds of these people. When you flip the bozo switch, you get labeled as a bozo, and you can never be unlabeled. Do you remember in 1982, this guy made a really stupid comment? Do you know what Charlie said at a meeting? You never can get past that, or almost never. It's very dangerous. Steve McConnell, I think, is the person who first came up with the concept of the bozo switch. Always be rational. This is somebody who loves rationality. It's also somebody who hates deadlines. And if there's anything he hates worse than marketing materials, it's arbitrary deadlines. If, very typically in business, they say this is going to take 6 months, so we'll tell them it takes 3 months so that they can work a lot faster. Drives them out of their mind. And respect his knowledge, because that's what he lives for. Okay, so we've looked at the people, and now what I'd like to do is just make a few suggestions to you as to how you might be able to conduct yourself during these meetings in order to reduce some of the pain. Now let me be clear. You can't always do it. I have been at these meetings where I've been savaged, I've been destroyed, some beautiful designs have been turned into patchwork quilts or worse, and there wasn't anything I could do, and in retrospect often I didn't think there was much I could do. Because remember this is not about the design so much as it is about the dynamics of the group that's reviewing the design. So choose your battles very, very carefully. Protect the design integrity. At the core of every one of our designs is stuff we cannot give up without truly harming our conceptual design, without destroying its integrity. There's other stuff we can afford to give up. Sometimes it's stuff we love. Wow, I built such a clever thing here. I just love this thing. Why is it that nobody else cares about it? It happened to me a couple days ago. I built this incredible slide which showed a Porsche racing car compared to a Tesla electric car. I worked for hours finding the perfect photos. I made them so cool. They were black, with glimmering red and three-dimensional, and I put them up in front of the client. He was clueless about what I was doing. Ann said, get rid of it. It hurt, but there's no other way to do it. Give it up because it wasn't central. The next thing to do is divide and conquer. What makes this group so difficult to deal with is that they're all together. And all the nonsense that goes on in their organizational life, all of the dynamics are really problematic. So whenever possible, divide and conquer with a pre-meeting.